What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another GGF video review, and today we'll be taking a look at the brand new EVOLV X2 from PHANTEKS. Now, we first saw this chassis mid last year, and there's been quite a bit of hype around the EVOLV X2, and that's probably because the PHANTEKS EVOLV lineup has been pretty popular. We've all known the EVOLV, and then the EVOLV X has had a lot of features, and I think that really has what put PHANTEKS on the map. Now, there has been a few delays in the EVOLV X2. It was going to be launching in Q4 around December in 2024. Then it got bumped to early January 25, and then it got bumped a little bit later to mid to end of January, but it is finally here. But before we take a look at this chassis, I do want to make an announcement that I will be relocating soon. Pretty much this will be my last video until I relocate. Myself and my family have built a new house in Colorado Springs, and that is pretty much done. So after this video, I think I've got about 2 weeks. I have to really get going on starting to pack. I'm going to move over there. I've got a new studio, so I'll be down for about a month and a half. I'll set that all up, and then I'll jump in and get straight back to all the videos that I do. But anyway, let's jump in and check out the EVOLV X2. The EVOLV X2 was first shown off at Computex last year, and it received quite a bit of attention with its stunning looks and the more affordable price tag it was set to launch at. Fast forward 6 months, and the EVOLV X2 has finally arrived. The case has had some changes since we last saw it, but overall the body design has stayed untouched. What PHANTEKS are going here with the EVOLV X2 is a minimalistic chassis with limited options. Now, that last part might not sound good, but not everyone wants a case that has complete modularity, multiple radio locations, optional accessories, and so on. If you want that, then the PHANTEKS MB lineup is probably more for you. The PHANTEKS X2 comes in 2 color options, black with black brushed aluminum accent panels, and then white with brushed silver panels. Now, I do remember seeing a black and gold variant at Computex, which did look really nice, although I think a few other accent color options would be good to see in the future. The idea behind the X2 is to provide a sunken look to the bottom and top fan locations. This is done by adding cover panels to conceal radiator or fans, quite similar to what we do in our builds where we make radiator covers. This look really does clean up a build, but one downside to this is going to be limited radiator support. The bottom fan location is sunk down for 3 120mm fans only, so I really can't see a radiator fitting down there at all, but I will cover rad support later in this review. One part with the brushed aluminum cover panels is how they cover from the side around to the front. I love this look, but it might just be me, but I feel this curve clashes with the squareness of the side and front glass panels. I feel either both needed to be curved or both needed to be square. Chassis dimensions come in at 585 high, 228 wide, and 455 deep, and we can see the X2 is on the more taller side, making it look less than a standard square. The base has a podium style look where it is raised up and has an unobstructed gap all around of roughly 25mm, so no issues with air intake here. This design reminds me of the older PHANTEKS Elite from many years ago. The whole base area is made of plastic, and no doubt the material choice here was to keep costs down. A removable dust filter can be found at the bottom, which slides out from the front, while another dust filter is attached to the inside of the top plastic cover. Front I/O have been separated with power and reset at the top at the front, while I/O can be found on the main side of the front, and here you'll find a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C, dual USB 3 Type-A, and an audio combo port. PHANTEKS have also added some RGB accents, one area at the bottom front, while another area on the top accent piece, which then runs along the top panel. The top panel also uses pogo pins for the RGB for easy panel removal. RGB control is done via the motherboard only, as there are no physical controls on the case. Getting inside the X2 is quite simple, and both side panels are locked in via one screw under the top panel. The side panels are also held in via clips, so I'll just put the screws in for when transporting the case. The front glass can be removed as well to make building your system that little bit easier, and is locked in at the back via 2 screws and slides out. The X2 features a pillarless design, which is all the rage at the moment, but the X2 is pillarless on both sides, which is something we haven't really seen before. With all panels removed, there was a bit of flex at the top, but as the front panel screws in, and once fixed to the top, it does eliminate any flex. The 4mm thick tempered glass side panels are beveled on the main leading edge, and also the right edge for a more premium look. On the white model, the tint is 100% clear, and on the black model is about a medium tint. Inside the X2, you find support for EATX motherboards, and this is made possible by cable grommets being on the side of the motherboard tray and not in the traditional spot where they could be covered by larger boards. Top and bottom cutouts follow the same implementation as the NV series, where there are no grommets at all, but rather these angled cutouts, which look better than just a traditional flat cutout where you can see straight through. The chassis also supports back connect and I think with the X2's looks paired with a full back-connect ecosystem would look killer. I had no issues with my test Z790 Tough BTF, MSI Z790 Project Zero, or AORUS B650E Stealth Ice boards. For GPU clearances, there isn't as much room as you would think, but then again, the X2 isn't an overly large case. There is 480mm of clearance here to the front glass panel. We don't have to worry about side radiator or fan clearance, as there isn't a spot for that. One nice touch that PHANTEKS have included is a clip-in aesthetic piece that covers up your PCI screws for a cleaner look. An anti-sag bracket is also pre-installed in the case and pretty much has one fixed position and can be adjusted up and down. I found this worked well for my test ARGB Strix 4080, but this could vary from card to card. One thing to note if using an EATX motherboard is that the anti-sag bracket may block some of the side SATA or USB ports. GPU width for water block cards, there is roughly 160mm, which is cutting it close, but my test Strix 4090 with an Optimus block did manage to fit, and for CPU air cooler height, there's roughly 155mm of clearance. Around the back you'll find a large door covering this complete area. Behind this door gives you access to the PSU location, storage access, and rear cable management. This can also be removed if needed. PSU support is at the bottom rear and units are installed via the back side. I had no issues with fitment. Even with this massive 1600 watt PHANTEKS power supply, there is still plenty of room for cables. There are two storage locations in the X2. Directly behind the motherboard can hold three 2.5-inch SSDs on a removable plate, while the secondary is in the basement in front of the PSU. To access this spot, you first need to pull the plastic cover out as indicated, which will then reveal a removable cage. This cage can take two 3.5-inch hard drives or up to two 2.5-inch SSDs with one 3.5-inch hard drive. For rear cable management, PHANTEKS had plenty of Velcro tie-down areas with plastic channel guides, and like always, I'll cover how cable management went in the outro once the build is completed. For all-in-one cooler support, the only location in the X2 is at the top via a removable bracket. The bottom is for fans only, and no 360 radiator support, and there is no side location either. 360 AIOs are supported at the top, and the idea is to install the radiator in the top compartment and then fans on the other side of the bracket in the main chamber. This is to give you the cleanest, minimalistic look. Max radiator thickness in the top compartment is 35mm. If you do require more room, you can install fans in the top compartment, which then gives you roughly 55mm of clearance to the motherboard. But to be honest, this really ruins the look and the idea behind the X2. So that's most of the review there. Let's take a look at the final build. So I'll talk a little bit about those two builds a bit later on, but you probably noticed during the main part of the review, I didn't cover custom loop or more custom radiator support. That's because the EVOLV X2 isn't really aimed at custom water cooling. Of course, I've done a bit of a custom loop just to show you that it can be done, but I have left the GPU completely stock, air cooled. This is a 4080, but I did try and mess around with a CPU loop. So in terms for custom water cooling support, You do have that maximum of the 35 millimeters at the top for radiator. I have a slim Bitspower that comes in at about 29, 30 millimeters thick. Unfortunately, you can't fit something more like a 40 mil. 40 mil rad at the top would be pretty good. You could possibly get away with CPU and then GPU cooling for that. For the bottom, you can't fit a radiator at all. That is for 360. You could fit a 240. There's plenty of room under here, but I just think it would ruin the whole design aesthetics of this case. If you really wanted to do a custom loop in, say, a PHANTEKS case, I would go something like the MV5, MV7. That would be perfect for that. The bottom actual removable fan tray that does come out that these fans sit on, because obviously you can't fix these fans down like this as they are. You need to remove that little tray that I showed you earlier in the video. You secure the fans on it, drop it down. They only have single holes for your fans. It doesn't have the proper radiator grooves anyway that a normal radiator bracket has that allows you to do the fine adjustments for radiator. So that's why I left that out for the custom water cooling support. I've done a funky sort of Bitspower little reservoir here, just something a little bit different, just to show you what can be done. I think what would be really sweet is maybe if PHANTEKS sort of went on with different models of this design. So maybe how they went with the NV lineup, they got a 5, a 7, and the 9. I do think that the EVOLV X2 isn't really fitting for the EVOLV name. Like I've built in many EVOLV cases, the original EVOLV, the original EVOLV X, and those cases had a lot of features, a lot of water cooling support, and it really, one of the main cases is what set PHANTEKS apart with those EVOLV series. And I think the X2 is, I don't really want to say stepping back a bit, but it's stepping forward in the aesthetic design. It's really brilliant, but in the feature department, it is quite lacking. And not everyone wants a case with heaps of water cooling support, removable motherboard trays, heap of storage support, and so on. So this case is going to be perfect, I would say, for a lot of people, because custom water coolers is only like 1 or 2%, probably not even that, of when you talk about everything combined for who will build in what cases. So yeah, all-in-one cooler support is definitely going to be your #1 priority in this case. But as I said earlier, if they did something like the MV5, if this was like the starting model of equivalent to the MV5, then they did like an MV7 equivalent, and then say like a big boy NV9 equivalent. So you could have like, man, I'm just visioning like a bigger version of this one that's equivalent to the NV7, actual dedicated 360 rad support at the top, dedicated 360 rad support at the bottom, and then maybe an NV9 equivalent that could help do something like 480 here, 480 here, but still keep this awesome aesthetic would be really cool. And things like the side reservoir mounting, as you can see, there's nothing here. It's completely glass on the back. You could do something like just little tabs or brackets that come out just to hold an FLT. You don't need the full structural sides that hold like a radiator if you're doing something like reservoir support. You just need a little bracket to come out behind the motherboard for the top, little brackets to come out the bottom for the bottom of the FLT, and that can slide up and down. And then you could have a nice floating FLT reservoir in something like a larger version of this case. Obviously in this size of the case, the EVOLV X2, it just would not be possible. So that's why I didn't talk too much about custom water cooling support, because there really isn't any in this case. And I wasn't going to try and water block the GPU, then the CPU, and then throw it on a slim 360, because it just wouldn't have been worth it. So that's why I stuck that 4080. Like, you could water cool something like a much lower end GPU, but then I thought, well, who's going to probably water cool something that low end? Moving on, rear cable management. The only issue I had was using custom cables around the back like this here. This is the AORUS back connect board. So the main issue I had was with the PHANTEKS PSU, which I've used in this one. It doesn't come with stock PSU cables, so you have to order the cable mod ones. That's the idea behind that. And the cable mod ones are a little bit thicker, so running that all around the back, cable managing those up, it was a little bit tight. Not just a back connect board, it's also front facing boards. The cables were a little bit thick and bulkier. Obviously in the black build I did, I'll show a shot of that. I used stock cables because I used an ASUS ROG PSU, and they come with much finer cables, and that was much easier to close the door, put the glass on, and so on. The door on this one, I really had to sort of push it closed, and it was popping off a little bit, but once I got that glass panel on, it did clean it up nicely. But apart from that, rear cable management, I had no other issues with all of the tie down points, no issues with running EPS and so on down the back side. Already mentioned I wanted to see some larger models. Not saying that this is a requirement or anything, just something that I would like to see. Maybe a slightly bigger version, because I think this aesthetic of this chassis is something we haven't seen before. I didn't mention the idea that I was speaking to PHANTEKS about this. So the sunken look is really designed for 25mm thick fans. If you're using 25mm thick fans like 90% or 99% of fans are, you will have them sitting exactly flush with this lip here and this lip here. Because PHANTEKS do their D30s, which are 30mm thick, if you use them in this chassis, which I use in this one, and then also the black build, they have that RGB aesthetic that runs along the top. If you use those fans in this case, the EVOLV X2, you do see that little bit of RGB aesthetic, and that's pretty much why they've designed it like this. So if you are running the D30 fans, you don't completely, I would say, cover the aesthetic on the edge of the fan. So I wanted to mention that 25mm fans, they completely flush. 30, you just see a little bit of the edge of the frame. Now, some other things I want to cover that PHANTEKS are launching around the same time as this. I think they may have launched these already. It's the NexLinq hub. I think it's NexLinq or NexLinq Q, something like that. They've got this hub which retails for $25. And then their new fans are the M25 G2. Now, they've had M25s for a while. These are the G2s. They basically come like this. Now, they aren't a bank of fans, so it's not all 3 fans joined together. That's how they come. They are joined together, but they can be removed. So you can buy single fans if needed, but they just come pre-installed all together, ready to go, saves you from doing it. This is the main front-facing side, so you have a screw there, that locks them in. And then the fan cables are daisy chainable on the back, and they all connect together. They use a single connector. So that single connector does the RGB and also the PWM for the fan and so on. That can be broken out to your standard RGB and your standard fan if you're not using their new hub. If you're using their new hub over here, you can plug the fan directly straight into that. And then this has USB control. Their software is really sweet. I haven't really played around with this yet. I didn't really have much time to play around with this because CES has just gone and it was pretty hectic around that time. But yeah, the software on this side, I had a look at this at Computex last year, and it does look pretty sweet on what you can do. So $25 for the hub. It's got 2 ports for the sets of fans, and then it also has an RGB input. So if you have a PHANTEKS case like this, instead of offloading it to the motherboard, the RGB that runs on the front and the RGB at the top, you can offload the RGB onto this controller, install their software. It uses 6-pin PCIe power, USB to the motherboard, and then you can install their software and away you go. You can play around. And then the fans are, believe it or not, $29.99. So that's $30 US for 3 RGB fans. So you have the infinity mirror on the front, and then you have blade illumination. And then you also get the nice little, same as on the D30s, those little covers that go over the screw holes. I've got some on this one and I've left some off, and they go on there like that, and they just neaten it up. So $30 for 3 fans. I think that's a bit of a game changer, especially from a brand like PHANTEKS. To wrap this up, a little bit about the build. As you can see there, something a little bit different than what I normally do. I've got that floating pump res combo from Bitspower. That's just sticking out there, purely just suspended by the tubing. Then I've gone, as I said earlier, no blocked GPU because I felt it just wouldn't be fitting to sort of sacrifice the cooling just for the sake of doing a custom loop. The CPU is a 9800X3D, so it's a pretty beasty little system with that, and then the 4080, and then we have that really nice T-Force Extreme ARGB memory, and then of course that AORUS Stealth back connected motherboard. And I think that just looks stunning, especially in white. And then of course the D30 fans. I decided to go with the D30 fans because I think they look just a little bit better than these, because these sit just completely flush and then you don't get that little RGB aesthetic on the side. But I think that's pretty much it. Overall, I really enjoyed working on this case. It's something, as I said earlier, I've said this many times, it is different than what we are used to seeing. In terms of functionality for some people, I think it's going to be fine for a lot of people. Like, I had no flaws. It's just really the fitment and what you want to do with it. If you're a mad custom looper, you want to fit a couple of rads, this won't be a case for you. Hopefully they can do a bigger version. We can see some different water cooling variants in a slightly larger case. But when it comes down to price, you're looking at $149.99 US. So bang on 150, which I think is pretty good. You're getting the nice material, all the aluminum. There is a bit of plastic down the bottom and the plastic cover there. And then you're getting the nice view of your hardware. And that is the 150 for the black and the white model. But I think that's it for this review. I do want to thank PHANTEKS for sending both of these cases out for me to check out this new hardware. And as I said in the start of the video, I will be back in probably a month or so as I am doing the move, and I'll get everything set up as fast as I can and just jump in to getting videos back out. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.